Hi, everybody. Welcome on in. We're just admitting people. So thanks for joining. Give a minute or so for everybody to just make their way in, get comfortable. I hope you have some coffee. It's a nice rainy day. All right, so good morning again, everybody across California. So on behalf of the team here at the California Climate and Energy Collaborative, I'm just really happy to welcome you back. This is our third meeting of the Local Energy Resources Network, and we're calling it LERN because we're here to learn together. And so I want to just invite folks here at the get-go to do a couple of things. If you are comfortable putting on your webcam, we like to see you. We like these to be as interactive as we can be, even though we're coming in from across the state. We don't have time to do introductions on these calls out loud, but if you can take a moment and introduce yourself over chat, that would be great. I would love for us all to get to know each other a little bit better on a monthly basis through these calls. Next slide, please. So I'll start with my quick introduction. I'm Angie Hacker, the statewide best practices coordinator based here, which is Carpinteria. Joined today by other members of the CECE team, including Ryan and John. And they can say hi over chat as well. You can always reach out to them if you're having any technical difficulties. For those that weren't with us for the last 2 months, this meeting series is designed to create a regular space for local governments and those that work with them to help each other learn about opportunities to advance their energy and climate goals. And so we have had, I think, a pretty action-packed first couple of meetings. And so it's a bit of a fire hose of information. I say that up front because I want you to know that we're going to kind of go through a whole series of things that might make it easier for you to access the resources to do your work. You don't have to stress out too much about taking notes. John on our team is going to be busily putting links in the chat if something comes up for a program we're talking about. We're also going to be pulling together a document at the end, which summarizes all the resources that have been shared. The recordings will be available as well as the slides. So, I've been on the inside of local government. I know you guys are very busy. So this is a Cliff Notes version of the things you might need to know about timely opportunities, hoping that this hour spent together is a really good investment of your time. And it is intended to be interactive, two-way conversations between local practitioners and partners who are often seeking to better help local governments do their work. And today's no different. We have a discussion. After we go through some opportunities, we're going to have a featured discussion with Sarah Risher. She's with the Strategic Growth Council. Very fortunate to have her here. She's going to talk to us about the state's new Regional Climate Collaboratives program, which is just in development now. You've probably been hearing about it. Maybe you've already attended a listening session, but this is sort of another opportunity to provide feedback to the state before they even get to drafting guidelines. So I'll introduce her in more detail in a little bit later. Please be prepared to ask, get questions, throw questions in the chat box as we go through, and we'll have some time for some interactive discussion Q&A afterwards, and then we'll finish up the way we always do with Ask the BPC, which is a segment for you to bring up anything that you're sort of dealing with in your community that you might be looking for others to share experiences, input, or knowledge, or for me to go and look for additional information for you. Okay, next slide, please. So this is our first opportunity for roundtable sort of interaction and sharing. I've got some opportunities that I would like to highlight for you, but I also want to encourage everybody on the call to share anything that you're aware of on your end in the chat. And so please do that as we get going here. And I'm just getting my screen back up. Okay. All right, so on the right there, I keep putting these on the horizon opportunities because such major things are happening and they're going through the machinations of turning from legislation or appropriation into programs. So these are things that we're sort of continuously tracking, and they're big and they're major. But stuff that's available right now, let's go through funding first. I've been tracking CDFA, California Department of Food and Agriculture. has a couple of opportunities. The first one is a funding opportunity. It's a competitive grant application. Applicants may request up to $250,000 to implement and showcase healthy soils practices and collect on-field and laboratory data on greenhouse gas emissions. So for folks that are working on their climate action plans and have an agricultural component, or just working with your agricultural producers and trying to make inroads there on your emissions, that's an opportunity to look at healthy soils and do some demonstration projects. We talked about some of the other ones in the last meeting, but CEC is offering grants right now to demonstrate vehicle to building technologies. So that means like plug-in vehicles as backup storage in public facilities located in disadvantaged or low income communities. So that first one, the CDFA, is due on New Year's Eve, which is kind of evil, but the CEC is offering, their deadline is on January 7th. And then we still have the EDA opportunities available. Good Jobs Challenge that ends at the end of January. FEMA BRIC we've talked about a couple of different times. That's that is the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. It's a little misleading of a deadline. That's the federal deadline to get in for the California deadline. That's actually by the end of this year. And so if you probably are already working on it. If you were going to, you're going to submit it into Cal OES. But just to keep that on your radar. And then on an ongoing kind of rolling basis, the EDA Economic Adjustment Assistance Grant is available too. And I have to say, these EDA grants are so big, so major, I would keep our eyes on them, and they're going to probably continue to happen. On my other side of it, we just got a big one. We worked with tribal communities. Now we're going to go develop advanced clean energy economy for Southern California tribes. I mean, you can do these big, bold things with EDA grants. I just want to make sure it's highlighted for you. And then finally, there is a California Volkswagen Mitigation Trust Zero Emission Transit or Shuttle Bus Grant. There's some fund that's basically available until funds run out. It's on a sort of a rolling basis. And that's just if you are looking to get some funding for transit or shuttle bus. Zero emission transit or shuttle bus. I mentioned CDFA because they also, under other assistance here, have water efficiency technical assistance program, and they're looking for applicants by January 19th. So I imagine a lot of you are also taking on water efficiency. If you're looking for TA, they do offer it. On my next slide, I'm going to go into a little bit more of a spotlight on the statewide reach codes program, just because I want to make sure you guys are aware of it. So many of you I know are working on your reach codes, working on electrification, and man, there's a lot of resources available for you. So more on that in just a second. And then there is, as always, this humongous wave of opportunities for input across a lot of the state agencies. And so one of them is from CARB. They have, CARB keeps having workshops and things around its scoping plan. They actually just yesterday had one on their decarbonization portion of their scoping plan. And so they had a whole workshop yesterday. The link is there. I link it even though it's past, because you can actually look at the presentation and the slides and recording. So then Strategic Growth Council has a lot going on. They've got like I mentioned, the Regional Climate Collaborative. So we're going to hear about that today, but they've done a whole series of listening sessions. And they're seeking some feedback before they write their guidelines. Strategic Growth Council also has big public comment opportunities coming on other programs. So they also run the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program. So they're going to have, I think it's draft guidelines will come out next year, and then you'll have till February 5th to provide public comment. That one is, it's a big pot of money. And so on all of these things, where local governments can find time to get involved and provide feedback, we can really shift the trajectory of these programs to serve ourselves better. And that's really what they're looking for, how they make these programs more effective for folks on the ground. And the same goes for the transformative climate communities. Actually, tomorrow is a deadline for that program to provide public comment. But we're talking, that one's a really big program as well, and just got a huge investment from the state. And we're talking about tens of millions of dollars. So I say that because I think it's worth your time. The last one here I want to mention here is OPR is in the process of designing its Community Economic Resilience Fund program. And it also is looking for input, and that would be due on January 6th next year. So all of these links are in your chat. You can go look at more if anything struck you as being interesting. I wanted to make sure that you were aware of all of these. Okay, so I want to turn my attention over back to the chat and see if anybody had anything that they wanted to share with folks about opportunities. Okay. I see a question about urban greening funds. I don't know that off the top of my head. We can go look. Good morning, everyone. Okay. All right, so if you know something else and you're willing to share it with others, so everybody benefits from taking advantage of these opportunities, please do throw it in the chat. You can always send it my way as well. We use this to populate our weekly update, which I know a lot of you enjoy. So just to go into a little more detail, and team, let me know if you see any raised hands or anything. I think not. Okay. I'm going to go into a little more detail on one opportunity. I mentioned I wanted to talk about the statewide Reach Codes program. So this is actually a program that's funded by ratepayer dollars and administered by some of the utilities. It's got a website. You can go look, a lot of different resources. I mention it because I participate on calls when I can. It's monthly calls, and they're so valuable as a place to go if you're working on Reach Codes, particularly right now on electrification. The people that are there are largely the state's experts on this stuff. So it might be the Building Decarbonization Coalition. It's lots of local governments that may be further along the process than you and can share knowledge. It may be, support organizations, consultants, and things like that as well. And it's just a nice place to go and get the download, really timely information, kind of like, in a way like this, but more technical and very specific to Reach Codes. But I wanted to make sure you're aware of the website as well, where you can look at model ordinances, checklists, staff reports. You can find cost effectiveness tools, monthly newsletters and case studies, and interactive Reach Code. There's a map where you can actually go and see who did what where, and just go searching around if you're ever looking for who to borrow from or different models of how to do things. All cities and counties throughout are sort of eligible to participate and access these resources, regardless of your energy providers. I see Lauren raising a hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick maybe announcement for jurisdictions who are in SoCal Edison territory. We work very closely with the statewide Reach Code team to provide a bit more customized Reach Code support. So we use all the resources that the Reach Code team provides, but we help jurisdictions individually who are looking to adopt a Reach Code. So if anyone on the call is in SoCal Edison territory and is thinking about wanting to start a Reach Code or explore options, please feel free to reach out. We're working with SoCal Edison to provide that support anywhere in their territory.
So Lauren with Franklin Energy, do you want to put your contact information in the chat for folks?
I'll go ahead and do that.
Great. It sounds like you are already resourced to provide free TA on that.
Yep, totally no cost. Anyone who even, if you have no idea where to start, we're happy to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff we like to know more about. So thanks for that. I think that's all I want to say on this spotlight, other than Misty Berseri is great. If you do want to join those calls, I would recommend reaching out to her directly and otherwise perusing around this website. All right, let's go to that next slide. All right, here we are already to the meat of our conversation today. I want to welcome Sarah. Sarah Risher is the analyst and the community assistance for the Climate Equity Program, which provides under the Strategic Growth Council, which provides technical assistance and capacity boosting services to help communities access funding resources, implement high impact projects, and advance their climate and equity priorities. So she does a lot with Strategic Growth Council, and through this role, she also is supporting the Regional Climate Collaborative. So she's going to talk about that with us today. It's kind of like a listening session. It's a little bit of a mini listening session. And so prepare to be asked questions, prepare to ask questions in the chat, and then prepare for this on, this discussion. There's going to be a Jamboard also, and I just want to sort of flag this. All of this is worth getting right. This Regional Climate Collaboratives program is so worth getting right, because as you might imagine, these regional structures that are starting to form, they might set the stage for how climate work gets done in California for decades. At least that's how I see it. And so off to you, Sarah. Thanks so much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today to talk about the Regional Climate Collaboratives program, or as I'll be calling it, RCC. Can we go to the next slide? One more. So as Angie mentioned, I'll provide a quick overview presentation, and then we'll hopefully have a good amount of time for some discussion around the program. Next slide. Okay, so before diving straight into the RCC program, I thought it would be helpful to provide a little bit more background on the team that is creating the program. So next slide. So as Angie mentioned, I am part of the Community Assistance for Climate Equity team at SGC, and we're developing the Regional Climate Collaboratives program off of lessons learned from our experience providing technical assistance and capacity building services, which are highlighted here on this slide. So 5 or 6 years ago, we launched the California Climate Investments Program, which provides funding for grant application and implementation assistance for individual grant programs. And while this effort was successful, we saw that many communities didn't have the relationships, plans, or projects in place needed to even create applications for a lot of state grant programs. And then this recognition led to the creation of 2 capacity building programs. So Boost, which is for local governments, and then the Partners Advancing Climate Equity program, which is for frontline community leaders. And it's also led to us creating the Regional Climate Collaboratives program. So next slide. So what is RCC? SGC was charged to create the RCC program per Senate Bill 1072, which was passed in 2018, though we just received funding to implement the program this year. RCC is a capacity building grant program aimed at helping under-resourced communities access the funding they need for their climate mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency projects. RCC is not going to be funding physical infrastructure as many of SGC's investment programs do, but rather RCC is funding the social infrastructure and upstream capacity building that is needed to enact large-scale multi-benefit projects down the road. RCC grants will fund different organizations to come together to form a collaborative stakeholder structure and conduct these capacity building activities, which I'll explain a little bit later, to enhance their community's overall ability to drive and sustain climate action. Next slide. Okay, so what is capacity building? Wanted to define that since I'll be repeating it so many times. Our statute defines capacity building as the process of strengthening local coordination, leadership, knowledge, skills, expertise, and access to resources. So RCC is really focused on strengthening community leadership and coordination as a way to access greater climate investments. Next slide. So this year, we received $20 million to implement the program. This $20 million is divided into 2 $10 million buckets. The first $10 million will need to be spent down by 2026, and the second $10 million will need to be spent down by 2027. And our legislation requires that these will be 3-year grant terms. And so with our funding timeline and the 3-year grant terms, that enables us to either do 2 funding rounds or 3 funding rounds, and we'll determine that through the guidelines process. Next slide. Okay, so what is mandated by Senate Bill 1072? Next slide. So first, our statute requires that the RCC program is specifically focused on under-resourced communities and ensuring that these communities are gaining access to funding for their priority climate projects. Our statute defines an under-resourced community as one that meets one or more of the following criteria. So they're within the top 25% of Cal Enviro Screen. They're designated as low income per AB 1550, or they have a median household income that is less than 80% of the statewide average. So this map here shows that there's a broad swath of California that is classified as under-resourced per this definition. This map, we will need to update it to reflect changes in Cal Enviro Screen 4.0. Next slide. Okay, so the scale is not defined in our statute actually. So this provides us some flexibility to support collaboratives of various sizes. We know that there are established collaboratives that are operating at a much larger scale, but our legislation is actually describing work of collaboratives that is conducted at a more place-based level. So we do envision supporting collaboratives of various sizes. So those smaller collaboratives, it will be important for those place-based efforts to be connected to and aligned with regional initiatives. And legislation does state that where feasible, RCCs funded through this program should build off of and leverage existing regional efforts. Next slide. Okay, so who is eligible for our program? We have broad eligibility, and eligible applicants include community-based organizations, nonprofits and foundations, small businesses, local government agencies, joint power authorities, tribal governments. And then this last one here is a bit of a catch-all. So other organizations with a history of providing community-based outreach and technical assistance. This one could look different depending on your community or regional context. Maybe it's faith-based organizations, your community choice aggregate, youth serving organizations, public school district, whoever it is that is playing an outreach or TA role within your region. Next slide. So for the structure of collaboratives, this might sound familiar to folks who are aware of the Transformative Climate Communities program. We will be requiring our applicants to form a collaborative stakeholder structure and submit one collective application. And in that application, they'll include a memorandum of understanding that outlines their organization and governance structure. Each collaborative will select a managing stakeholder that has the organizational capacity and financial capacity to receive and be accountable for the grant. And what might be a little different about this program than other state programs is that any eligible applicant from that was listed on that previous slide can serve in this managing stakeholder role. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a local government. And then this managing stakeholder isn't meant to be the lead applicant. It's more so administrative. And this is a way for us to ensure that RCCs are fostering shared decision-making power across all members of the collaborative. Next slide. Okay, so these are the activities that are listed in our enabling statute. And this is not an exhaustive list. We can certainly create more activities for collaboratives to do. So these first four here, we bucket as our outreach and outreach and engagement related activities. So conducting outreach to build awareness of competitive grant programs, convening stakeholders or regarding community priorities, building relationships, developing plans that contain specific projects and strategies to advance the community's vision for change. And then the next three are bucketed around technical assistance. So providing technical assistance to stakeholders to develop multi-benefit projects that are aligned with existing funding sources, connecting to subject matter experts, providing additional assistance and training for grant application development, grant management, grant implementation, and monitoring. And then this last one is the most specific of these, and that is to assist in the development of local job training and anti-displacement programs and policies. And this is to ensure that all of the work that communities are doing to build their capacity and bring in greater investment, those people doing that work are also receiving the benefits of those investments. So we have a poll here just to get a quick sense of which of these activities are resonating with you all. I think, John, can you get that pull up for folks. Or maybe it's Ryan, someone. Awesome. So please select the top 3 activities that you feel most represent your community's capacity building needs. And it's okay if you think all of them are great, just your top 3. And this will get us a sense of, yeah, what's really resonating with folks. Are folks unable to access it?
You know what? It looks like there's not a way to actually select, at least on my screen. Oh, here you go.
Oh, awesome.
I wonder if anybody else is still having trouble with the poll.
Yeah, Phil, if you are having issues with the poll, you can type in your response to the chat. Definitely want to hear from everyone.
It's working. Okay, great.
We're about at 58% participation. Can try to get at least to 75 before closing.
I need a special bell to alert all the multitaskers out there.
Okay, I see a sudden slowdown. So maybe this, oh, there we go. Okay, I'll give folks 5 more seconds to add in their responses. Okay, I think we can end the poll and share the results. Okay, so seems every single activity was voted on. Our top 1 seemed to be develop community and project plans. That's at 52% of the group. And then provide policy, program, and technical advice to stakeholders is tied with coordinate and implement assistance and trainings. This is really wonderful. Thank you all. We can stop sharing these results, and then I have just a few more slides before we get to the discussion. So in the chat, please feel free to offer what you think might be missing from this list and that we should consider incorporating into our guidelines. Okay, so next slide. So what else, in terms of grant administration, our enabling legislation does give us the authority to provide advanced payment, which is very exciting. We know that there's been a lot of barriers with the state's reimbursement model. And so we're currently scoping out what that advanced payment structure looks like and what those requirements will be. And yeah, just really excited about this. So if you have any experience with advanced pay, I'd love to hear with you and connect with you, because we want to ensure that this is a very streamlined process and not unintentionally creating more burdens. So next slide. Okay, next slide. In terms of guidelines development, we are currently developing our first draft. We just concluded our listening sessions on December 1st. And we're doing a few focus groups this month. We will release our draft guidelines for public review in February. We'll have them open for a 30-day public comment period. And during that public comment period, we'll host some public workshops to directly engage stakeholders. And then we will incorporate those public comments received and bring another draft, the proposed guidelines, to our council for adoption in April, with the goal to release our notice of funding availability in spring, and then hopefully award our first round of awardees in late summer. Okay, so next slide. I talked pretty fast. So before we jump into the discussion, wanted to see if there are any quick clarifying questions I can answer.
I don't see clarifying questions, but anybody's free to raise their hand too if they'd like. Okay.
Cool. So we will move on to our discussion, and at any point if questions do come to you, you can drop them in the chat or ask them directly. I am able to respond over email as well if we don't get to the questions in this session. So next slide. So I have these guiding questions for discussion, and we will use Jamboard so folks can add comments directly to the Jamboard. Thank you, John, for dropping it in the chat, but folks can also feel free to unmute and we can have a conversation. So our first question here is, what current resources does your jurisdiction have for coordinating and collaborating with external partners? And what additional resources would allow you to expand this work? Our second question is, how have you partnered with external partners to align community priorities with existing plans? And how could you see RCC supporting community-driven plan alignment? And then this last one, trying to get at like measuring success, is what would success look like at the end of the RCC grant period? So after those 3 years, and then what would be changed for your jurisdiction as a result in the long run? So I wonder if we can have John or Ryan share screen of the Jamboard so folks can see the responses people are adding in real time, and we can chat about them.
I can switch that over to that screen in just a second so everyone can see it.
Great.
Awesome.
Sarah, you may want to give a little instruction for folks that are new to Jamboard.
Yes, so if you are new to Jamboard, there should be on the left-hand side a little icon with that looks like a sticky note. And so you would click, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4th one down. You would click on that, and then you'll be able to type in your responses. Oh, awesome. I'm already seeing folks adding to this. Awesome. I'm seeing mentions of existing collaboratives. So Adapt LA, LARC, Capital Region Climate Readiness Collaborative, San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative. And so what exactly do those networks currently provide? Is it like resource sharing platforms? Is it community meetings or partner meetings? What is it that they offer that maybe our program should support communities with as well?
Do you want folks to go ahead and unmute themselves if they've dropped a post-it?
Yeah, please feel free to unmute. These sticky notes are kind of a springboard for greater conversation.
Hi, Sarah. Melody from USCC grant here. I put the one in about Adapt LA and LARC and similar regional networks. And I think some of these networks provide a lot of things, but like technical support, connecting latest and greatest science to a planning perspective, and also kind of helping translate some of those tools in a way that can be used by planners, and vice versa, taking the needs of local planners and kind of bringing that back to scientists to help fine tune and develop tools. So that's just an example of one thing.
Awesome. No, I really appreciate that example. One other question I have connected to this is, are there any resources that these networks provide that are supporting local jurisdictions partnering with CBOs? So a lot of our state grant programs are more and more asking applicants to show that their project was developed in partnership with community and that they are conducting a robust community engagement. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more of what resources have really helped your jurisdictions partner successfully with CBOs, and then what are some additional resources that maybe you don't have, or different additional trainings that RCC can help with?
So this is Christine. We have pretty good coordination with our local community groups and nonprofit groups. The issue for us is actually having enough staff to help us. I mean, there's only like one person in every department, so it makes it kind of hard. I mean, we have the relationships built already, but it's how many things can one person do? Basically, in our community is what prevents us from moving forward or doing more than what we already are doing. So it would be helpful to have support in that area and staffing support.
I really appreciate that comment, Christine. And that is definitely something that has come up quite a bit in our listening sessions about the importance for RCC to be able to fund staff time, to fund interns, fellows. I see some Civic Spark fellows on the call, which is really wonderful. So curious if that is resonating for folks as well, the additional staff time piece. And if you think, one, additional staff time at your jurisdiction, but also do you think that your CBO partners could benefit from having additional staff in their organizations?
I could just hop in about that. I'm Susan Wright with the County of San Mateo, and I just put a sticker up that said this year we had an RFQ for CBOs. How many alphabets will I say? So we contracted with 10, basically ongoing on-call contracts, so that we can more easily reach out and get assistance for input on program design or outreach for programs, which is helpful. And it's a first step, but I think what would be even more helpful is if we somehow had the funding, which we don't, to create blanket funding all the time, or to say there's an extra staff person, because I don't know how they're able to manage it when they don't know really in 2022, when will we need them? How much will we need them? There's not that pre-planning. And so they're trying to be responsive to what we're asking. And I think that's hard, but it's at least a start that we can now pay them for what in the past we would have hoped they would come to a meeting and give us input, or we'd want to work collaboratively and not have a way to compensate them very easily before. So it's better.
Totally. And that's another really great point, and something we've heard a lot is the need to fund CBOs for their time, and community members. Those community participatory costs will just enable better engagement and collaboration between partners and between cities and residents. So I'm trying to see here, my screen is tiny, so bear with me, see what else has been added here. So the Central Coast Climate Collaborative provides a forum for sharing information and connecting climate practitioners across sectors in the Central Coast region. That's awesome. I'm seeing a thread around convening and connecting partners that is very in line with our eligible activities. Okay, I will ask, is it John or Ryan, whoever's driving, to go to the next slide? And feel free to continue adding stickies to that one if you have thoughts. Okay, so this next question, how have you partnered with external partners to align community priorities with existing plans or new plans as you're developing them? What does that collaborative process look like? What are the ways you've brought in residents? And then if maybe you haven't done that to the degree that you would want to do, how do you see RCC as a way to support your jurisdiction or your region doing this community-driven planning and plan alignment? So there's already some stickies here. RCC can serve in conducting public outreach and community engagement with various community groups. DAC jurisdictions have low capacity for outreach. This would help influence plans and grant applications. Does the person who dropped that want to elaborate a little bit more?
Hi, I dropped that note there. My name's Lizzie. I'm a Civic Spark Fellow with the City of Arvin. With our various community outreach, it would be beneficial if we had extra support in reaching different community groups and kind of getting to the next level of community engagement, past the kind of idea of level 1 informing, and really having a more working together process and a collaborative process, and kind of having the community decide what are possible grant applications go for, what are major priorities of the communities, those types of things. So that's what I was getting at.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate your remarks there. That's really helpful. Let's see. We have a question here. How do we center disadvantaged communities and community representatives? And so does the person who added that want to elaborate a little bit more? Is that an ask for trainings for that through the RCC program? Yeah, curious to hear a little bit more. Okay, that's okay. Yeah, anyone feel free to jump in if they have thoughts there. Let's see. So San Mateo County, their Climate Ready Initiative, hosted a series of community meetings and task force around resiliency plannings. That's awesome. I'm curious how overall that went. What were some successes of that initiative? Where are some lessons learned for maybe next time you do it? What would you do differently?
This is in a different work group than mine, so I can't speak to the details, but I would say it went on a couple of years ago. It spawned some spin-off task forces that work like housing and climate, for instance. And it also was a really good starter that now the county has just updated the local hazard mitigation plan and incorporated a lot of what was learned from those meetings. So, and it was a good opportunity to involve a lot of different community stakeholders. So that's what I can say.
No, thank you. That's great. Let's see this next one, accessible meeting support. So translation, interpretation, childcare, sign language, participation stipends, transit, mobility services. Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a recurring theme across many of our questions around designing this program, around this community participatory, these community participatory costs seem to be really, really key to ensure community-driven work. Okay, I think I have about 6 minutes left, so I want to get to the next question. But before going to that next question, I wanted to see if anyone had any final thoughts on this question. Okay, seeing none, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so what would success look like at the end of the RCC grant period, and what would be changed for your jurisdiction as a result in the long term? So I have to squint. Success would be establishing regional programs that jurisdictions and CBOs are collaborating to implement measures identified in climate action plans. Absolutely, I think that's exactly what our legislation is describing, so it's great to see that echoed here. Success would be for a collaborative multi-jurisdiction project that receives funding long-term, would set the precedent for continued collaboration and alignment of climate work. Now, I really appreciate that comment. The person who added that, did you want to come off mute and share a little bit more around this like multi-jurisdictional piece?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Angeline Fauché, and I work with the City of Coweta. Good to see you again, Sarah, and to see some former Civic Spark fellows here in the crowd. Yeah, I dropped that. It would be really wonderful to be able to see kind of multi-jurisdiction coordination and support, seeing as we have a lot of really small cities and jurisdictions within Santa Barbara County and kind of along the Central Coast. We're best suited to be able to receive funding when we collaborate together. And obviously, climate change does not acknowledge jurisdictional boundaries. And I think more coordinated efforts kind of across jurisdictions is needed to really create effective programs and implementation of projects that will improve the lives of folks across our region. So that's kind of why I dropped that in there, and would love to be able to see that happen for our region and also anywhere across California. So.
No, thank you. I really appreciate that. And it's definitely something we're thinking about a lot too. And how can the RCC program, not just have folks come together for these 3 years within the grant term, but the work that they're doing within those 3 years will give them the momentum and the resources to carry on into the future, doing really robust collaboration and coordination, because you're right, climate change doesn't recognize our jurisdictional boundaries. Seeing that we have 2 minutes here left, I wanted to see if anyone just wanted to come off mute, ask any questions, elaborate on any stickies that they provided here. Yeah.
I wanted to provide some information that you may already know, Sarah, and that's that a lot of the collaboratives I have seen over the years, they've come together in a grassroots fashion, and they're often tied together by volunteers or an organization that's taking the lead sort of voluntarily without funding, or member dues. And all of those, I think, has probably hamstrung these organizations from doing more in lieu of a big grant, and just the real need for a long-term vision of what funding will occur. So this one-time setup is great. And then thinking, for folks to feel more comfortable really diving into this, thinking through the long-term path. What does a pathway of funding look like?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts, comments, or questions from folks? And
this is Christine. I'd like to see at least one tangible product and project at the end of the period. So whether it's a project that reduces greenhouse gases, or a project that ultimately somehow benefits the environment, really that's my goal. Is a clean energy fair. We have a clean energy fair template that we worked on very hard. I'd like to, at the end of this project, be able to say, hey, we completed our clean energy fair. We now have people driving around in electric cars or more knowledgeable about programs that are out there.
Absolutely, yeah. Beyond the, established network that we're hoping our CCs can help strengthen, we do want them to result in these tangible projects and outcomes. So really appreciate that. Okay, I know I'm supposed to turn it back to you now, Angie. Is that correct?
Yeah, take a look at the chat too. There's some folks kind of chiming in more on comments than there are questions, but it's useful, and we'll make sure you get a copy of that as well. I do have one question for you. I'm going to move on to the BPC portion, but just sort of acknowledging that there are sort of species of this that already exist, right? So there's collaboratives, there's resilience hubs, there's jurisdictions just doing climate action planning, and in doing so, forming these teams that continue along into implementation. And do you see all of those as being sort of eligible for this kind of a program?
Yes, that's a really wonderful question and something that we get often. And so we would really like for our CC to both catalyze new collaboratives and new efforts, but then also allow the collaboratives or networks that are already existing and doing this work scale up their impact. And so if there are existing collaboratives that are comprised of our eligible applicants, they can certainly apply, and then ensuring that, so if it's a collaborative that's operating at a really large scale, ensuring that when they do apply, they have the under-resourced communities within their region that they're going to focus on within that 3-year grant term. And so bringing communities that maybe aren't as active in their current structure into the fold and ensuring that they're benefiting from the capacity building efforts that the collaboratives will be conducting in this 3 years, and ensuring that the projects that are identified are then cited in those under-resourced communities, if that answers your question.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks to everybody for really participating in that and giving some good feedback. Sarah, are there any other opportunities for feedback? If people wanted to send you something in writing, they still can, right?
Yes, you absolutely can send any public comments or letters to our ta@sgc.ca.gov email, or if you want to connect with me and my team directly, happy to hop on a call. You can email me at my email here, and then we will. I will share with Angie once we have our February public workshops date set and that draft is released. I'll let Angie know to send it out to this group.
Thank you, Sarah. All
awesome.
right.
Thank you so much.
All right, hey, we have a great group today, and this last portion that we like to do, you can go on to the next portion, John, is just the Ask the BPC, which is sort of a catch-all standing opportunity to submit questions or requests for help. Unless it's a simple question, I may have to go out and look for answers outside of this meeting, but this is a place to exchange knowledge between each other. Pose a question, maybe somebody on the line has an answer, has some experience that they can share with you. If not, I'll sort of tuck it into my TA spreadsheet here and see what we can do to help. So I want to leave some space open for this, and I do have one question for the group. So feel free to just chime in at this point, raise your hand or just unmute. This can be interactive. What are you working on? What do you need help with? Who would you like to copy from? What kind of information would you be interested in learning from other jurisdictions that are doing similar work? Ty Keith, you've mentioned a few times something on the urban greening and food front. Do you want to say anything out loud? See if you can get the fish for some answers here. Oh, unable to speak, but I am listening. Okay. All right. Well, there was one question I got from a jurisdiction who, and I'm having trouble identifying it, but wanted to know if you're familiar with any programs that focus on electrifications of households that use propane. Is anybody familiar with a particular program that focuses on that? And I know the devil's in the eligibility details sometimes, but one that sort of outwardly focuses on it, or maybe you have to, you know, dive into the guidelines, but it is eligible. If you do come up with anything, you can feel free to drop it in the chat or send information my way. That would certainly help that jurisdiction as we kind of continue to go out and look for answers. All right.
Angie, I missed the main part about the propane. It's looking for a program for houses that use propane.
Yeah. Programs that focus on electrification of households. So that, I don't know if that means necessarily, it could be a locally designed program. Are there any, maybe a CCA or a LERN or some other jurisdiction is offering a program that does allow electrification for households with propane, or some other organization, not a local government, that's offering services to jurisdictions.
I just wanted to say, we don't have a program per se, but we are just on the tail end of a case study project where we're getting the costs of electrification for 10 different houses in San Mateo County. And we wanted to make sure include one that the current fuel source is propane. So we'll have a little bit of data about it. It's not a program, but when that's available, we can share it out.
So like the first step of identifying.
Great. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. That could be helpful. I might send somebody your way. I do see. Yes.
Oh, this is Emery from MBAG. I think the tech program, which is the new program that was launched with contractor incentives, the eligibility is based on zip codes. And so right there on their website, it does say you don't have to be an IOU gas or electricity consumer. So to my mind, that means you could do propane electrification with those funds.
Thank you so much, Emery. Appreciate that. Dave Shukla, I think is how I say your name. Do you want to say this question out loud? He's looking for others to chime in.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry for a bit of a brain dump there, but a lot of things funnel down to Long Beach. If anyone's working on redistricting generally, or how some of these political changes relate to some of our more like science-based rulemakings, I'd appreciate talking. Yeah.
All right. So he's left his contact information there in case anybody's working on that. All right. Well, thank you for that. Folks can contact me anytime. If there are additional questions, there's my email address. Maybe somebody can drop it in the chat as well. I'm a gopher. We know a lot of experts, so we try to send you to the right person unless we can find the information ourselves. So let us know how we can help. Let's go to our last slide. This is just a reminder of what we at CECE do, just so you know that we aren't just a forum, although the forum will be coming up this year. We offer a weekly update, so if you aren't already subscribed, that's one place to stay up to date on a weekly basis on all the things we know about that are happening, from news to opportunities, job opportunities, funding, and everything else. We offer technical assistance, like I just mentioned, in the form of basically going and answering whatever questions we can. There is a TA directory we want to make sure you're aware of, where we have experts and peers that are providing knowledge on specific topics. If you're finding yourself in need of help, we are recruiting more technical assistance folks, and we are also pointing you in that direction if any of those that are already listed can help. And then we always offer live events, so like this, but also topical webinars and so if you have ideas for the kinds of information and content that you might like some professional development on, or just some exchange of knowledge, you can always let us know. And other resources, including a relatively new page on our website. It's a funding program page, so funding resources, where we talk all about what funding opportunities, what programs you might be eyeing and looking for. All right, next slide. And that's it for today. Thank you so much to everybody for coming. Our next meeting is January 11th. We're actually going to have Cal EPA coming to talk with us, the Office of Environmental Health and Hazard Assessment. They're going to talk with us about CalEnviroScreen and the new 4.0 version. And that has a lot of It's a big deal for all of those of you who are working on identifying your disadvantaged communities and also trying to become eligible for some of these big funding opportunities that are coming down the pike. Feel free to share the invitation to join these meetings with others and let me know what else we can do to make these events more interesting with content or speakers or anything else. With that, I'll let you all go. Happy holidays, and we'll see you next time.